The hardest part of working with a great remote assistant is not the work itself. It is the gap. You are in different time zones. There is no shared office. There is no walking across the room and tapping someone on the shoulder when a quick question pops into your head. For a long time, that gap felt like the whole problem to me. It was the thing that made remote help feel harder than it really should be. Then it slowly clicked that the gap is not a flaw in the setup at all. Handled right, it is quietly the single best part of it. So in this video, I want to walk you through the exact rhythm I run and the small set of tools I lean on to turn that gap into a feature instead of a headache. This is the honest, day-to-day version of it, not a glossy pitch. The gap is actually leverage. So let me start by flipping the way you probably picture it. When your assistant works while you sleep and you sleep while they work, the business is awake for far more hours than either of you could ever cover alone. Here is what that actually looks like in practice. I hand off a batch of work at the end of my day, they pick it up at the start of theirs, run with it for hours, and by the time I wake up, it is sitting there waiting for me, finished. The work that used to sit dead in my queue overnight now moves forward in exactly the hours I was asleep anyway. I review it over coffee, send back notes and the next batch, and then the whole loop just starts over again. Done well, work moves forward almost around the clock, and yet neither of us is grinding a longer day to make that happen. That is real leverage, and it exists because of the time difference, not in spite of it. But I want to be honest about the catch. This only works if you build for it on purpose. If you treat the gap as an annoyance to fight against, it simply stays an annoyance forever. If you design your entire way of working around it, that very same gap quietly becomes the most valuable thing about the whole arrangement. Asynchronous by default. So here is the first principle, and honestly everything else hangs off it. You build for asynchronous work first. Asynchronous just means we are not required to be online at the same moment for real progress to happen. The default is that I write down what needs doing clearly enough that they can act on it entirely without me. That means every task I send carries three things. What the finished outcome should actually look like when it is done. Whatever context, links or examples they need to get there. And the real deadline, so the order of priorities is never a guessing game. If any one of those three is missing, that is usually the exact thing they end up blocked on later. When I get those three things right, nobody is ever stuck waiting for me to wake up. They always have a clear next thing to pull from, and they can keep moving through their entire day without needing a single reply from me. Live conversation becomes the rare exception, saved for the few things that truly need it, instead of the thing the whole day quietly depends on. Building async first is a little more work upfront because you cannot lean on a fast message to paper over a lazy, vague request, but it is exactly that discipline that lets the around-the-clock loop actually run on its own. The tools I actually use, people always expect a long list of software right here, and I am going to disappoint them on purpose. I keep the stack deliberately small because every extra tool is one more place to check and one more place for something to quietly get lost. I use exactly 4 categories, and I genuinely do not care which specific app fills each one. One place to chat for the quick back and forth that does not need to be formal. One place to track tasks and their status, so at any moment we can both see what is in progress, what is blocked, and what is already done. One place to keep documented procedures, the written guides for how each recurring job gets handled, so the answer to how do I do this again is always written down somewhere we can both find it. Every time we solve a new recurring task once, it becomes a short written guide, so we never have to solve it from scratch a second time. And short screen recordings instead of live meetings, where I record my screen walking through a task once, and they watch it back whenever it actually suits them. That is the entire kit, and notice what is deliberately not on that list. No sprawling suite of a dozens overlapping apps that nobody ever keeps current. The smaller the toolset is, the more likely both of us actually keep it up to date, and the task board that everyone genuinely trusts is worth more than 10 clever tools that nobody ever bothers to open. So what does a normal day actually look like across the gap? The rhythm has 3 simple parts, and it runs as a loop. First, at the end of their day, my assistant sends me a short handoff, what they finished, what they got stuck on, and anything they need from me to keep going tomorrow. It takes them about 5 minutes to write, and it saves us both hours. Second, at the start of my day, I read that handoff before I touch anything else. I answer their questions, I clear whatever is blocking them, and I line up the next batch of work, so it is all sitting there ready before they even log on. Third, a couple of times a week, we hold a short overlap window, a slot where our working hours actually touch, and we can talk in real time. That is where we handle the messy things that are slow and painful to write out. A tricky decision, a bit of planning, a piece of feedback that needs real back and forth, the handful of things a written message would only muddle. The rest of the week runs almost entirely on that written hand-off and pick-up loop. The quiet beauty of it is how little of it depends on the two of us being awake at the same time. The overlap window is a small, deliberate luxury, not the fragile thing the whole operation is balanced on. Writing tasks that survive the gap. Now here is the single skill that quietly makes or breaks all of this. You have to learn to write the tasks that survives the gap. What I mean is an instruction so complete that a reasonable person can pick it up and carry it all the way to done without needing to ask you a single follow-up question. Because remember, if they do have to ask, that one question might cost a whole day while it sits there waiting for you to wake up. So before I send anything, I read it back and I ask myself one simple thing. If I were half asleep and had never seen this task before, could I finish it from these words alone? If the honest answer is no, then I am not done writing it yet. Usually that means I am missing the actual goal behind the task, or a quick example of what good looks like, or the one weird edge case I already know is coming. It feels slow to write things out at this level of care. It feels much faster to just fire off a one-line request and figure the rest out live. But that shortcut is a genuine trap across a time gap, because every hole in your instructions turns into a full day of somebody waiting. Spending 10 extra minutes writing clearly buys back hours of nobody being stuck. It is the highest leverage habit in my entire way of working, handling questions without blocking. Still, no matter how carefully you write, they will eventually hit something you just did not cover, at the exact moment you happen to be offline and unreachable. So you need a simple rule for that moment, or every bit of your momentum dies right there. Mine is this. If you hit something unclear, do not stop and wait. Make your best reasonable call. Write down the decision you made and the reason you made it, and then keep moving. Flag it for me in your end-of-day handoff, so I can confirm it or gently correct it later. The worst possible outcome here is not a wrong guess on some small thing. A wrong guess is usually cheap and quick to fix. You catch it at the review, you correct it in a line, and the work kept moving the entire time. The truly bad outcome is a capable person sitting frozen for 12 hours, blocked on something tiny, waiting on a permission they could easily have given themselves. I would far rather review 10 small judgment calls after the fact than watch a single whole day quietly evaporate over a question that was never really that serious. And here is the part most people miss. Giving someone real permission to make the call actually makes them better at the work over time, because they start building genuine judgment instead of just waiting around to be told. The trust that makes it work. None of this holds together without one thing sitting underneath it, and that thing is trust. When you cannot physically see someone working, it gets tempting to reach for surveillance. Tracking software, screenshots on a timer, mouse movement logs, a demand for a reply within 2 minutes just to prove they are really there. I want to be blunt about this. All of that stuff quietly kills a remote team. It tells a capable adult that you do not trust them, and it pushes them to optimize for looking busy instead of doing genuinely good work. The whole thing that makes async possible is that I judge outcomes, not hours. I honestly do not care whether the work happened in one long focused stretch or in 3 calm blocks fitted around their actual life. I care that the outcome we agreed on showed up on time at the quality we agreed on. How they got there and which hours they chose to do it in is genuinely none of my business. That is the entire measure of it. Clear ownership is the thing that replaces a boss hovering over a shoulder. When a person owns a real outcome and they know they are trusted to reach it in their own way, they bring a judgment and a pride to it that no monitoring tool could ever squeeze out of them. Surveillance buys you the thin appearance of work. Trust and ownership buy you the actual thing. The mistakes I made, I did not figure any of this out cleanly, so let me try to save you the detours I took. My first mistake was too many live meetings. Early on, I tried to run the whole relationship like an in-person office job, with daily calls scheduled straight across an ugly time difference, and it burned both of us out fast for almost no real benefit. Most of those calls should have been 3 lines of written text. My second mistake was vague tasks. I would fire off a quick fuzzy request and then feel annoyed when it came back not quite right, when the honest fault was entirely mine for never saying clearly what right was even supposed to mean. And my third mistake was probably the worst of them. I expected instant replies across a 12-hour gap. I would send a message and then quietly wonder why it was not answered, completely forgetting the person was sound asleep, living a whole full life in a totally different part of the world. Every one of those mistakes grew out of the very same root error. I was trying to force a normal office onto a situation that simply is not an office at all and never will be. The moment I stopped fighting the gap and started genuinely designing around it, all three of those problems just dissolved on their own. So that is the rhythm. So that is the whole rhythm, from start to finish. Treat the time zone gap as leverage, not as friction. Build for asynchronous work by default. Keep your set of tools small and a little boring. Run a simple loop of an end-of-day handoff and a start-of-day review with a short overlap window saved only for the things that truly need it. Write your tasks so complete that they survive the gap. Give people a clear rule for acting when they are stuck and you are offline. And judge outcomes instead of watching hours, because trust is the whole foundation the rest of it stands on. None of it is complicated. It just quietly asks you to stop pretending the person is down the hall and to build for the plain reality that they are not. Now, if you are at the earliest step and still need to actually find that person, I hire through a site called onlinejobs.ph, and there is a link to it down in the description. I will be straight with you, that is an affiliate link, so if you sign up through it, it supports this channel at no extra cost to you. You are never once obligated to use it. If this kind of honest, hands-on breakdown is useful to you, then subscribe and follow along, because there is a whole lot more of it coming. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.